This is me, and this is the creative brick wall I've been facing over the past few days, which, when you're a Minecraft YouTuber who relies on building and creativity, is a bit of a problem. So my last week's hunt for inspiration went something like this.
I'll do anything, I'll do whatever it takes to.
So we begin with our color palette. We've got our little stone gradient for the base, we've got our wood accents for the pillars and support beams, we've got our creamy colors for the walls, we got our birch here as shading to make it look slightly darker than this usual wall color, we've got brick for things like accents and chimneys to give it a little pop of color, and then we've got our roof color, this kind of mix of dark prismarine and warped wood. And because I'm a responsible YouTuber who does absolutely no prep off camera where it won't be used for content, I already have an outline made. I'm still new to this thing. All jokes aside, this is pretty much my classic way of starting a build. You can just see kind of the basic shape framed out, mostly starting with the roof lines, and that's where we're going to start today. We're going to start by filling in this roof, getting a shape. I like doing this. It's kind of counterintuitive, and if you're doing this in survival, it usually doesn't work. But I do like doing this in creative just because it lets you get an idea of the actual shape of the build before you get too much time invested into it. For example, if you were to build up these walls and then decide that you want to move the roof over, it's significantly more work than to just build the roof, realize you don't like the outline, and change it slightly. But anyway, this roof, we've got, a dormer here, some nice details, a little bit of contrast. We have a little spot for a kind of covered walkway here. So yeah, I've just kind of framed this out, and I'm excited to actually get started on it. With the outlines already placed, this is pretty much going to consist of filling in this roof with a bunch of block placing just to get a more finalized vision of what this roof is going to look like once everything is out of the way and done. And now pivoting to texturing this foundation, and it's not entirely just texturing. You can see the way I'm placing these blocks is very deliberate. You'll notice that the darkest end of this gradient, the acacia, is being put into corners, into the lower areas, and this is just creating the illusion that this base is actually shaded and it's obeying what we would know as the laws of light in the real world, but also just gives this a bit more of realism, as well as gives a guide for your texturing as opposed to just randomly placing blocks here and there. With the foundation and the roof done, the next step logically is to get the wood framing in so that we can then get to work filling in the walls and getting the details in. And this is going to be a very classic fantasy framing, just using stripped spruce logs, trapdoors, and stairs just to get those wood beams, arches in. You can see here making this circular window to go above the main front door, and generally just filling in a lot of wooden arches to frame this build and add some detail to the walls. Anyway, with our framing in, it's time for the last boring part, just filling in the walls with just plain blocks, and then after that, we can get to detailing. We now have a very plain, very boring, very undetailed build, but the shape and the general layout now is there. So now we get to the fun part, the detailing, adding windows, adding a little bit of texturing, just making this place feel a little bit more like a build and a little bit less like something that I put together with a bunch of copy-paste in about 10 minutes, which, full disclaimer, is what I just did. You can see here I test a few different window designs with scaffolding and with oak trapdoors before ultimately deciding on the scaffolding for this area, and don't be afraid to test out a couple different building ideas. And then, moving on to the front door, I decided to make it out of this mangrove to give it a nice pop of red color amidst something that's otherwise very brown and very creamy heavily. Cycled through a couple of different designs here. You can see once again, one of my favorite ways of making door handles is just using two levers to connect the two. And then moving on to the rest of this front facade, you can see once again trying out different window designs and then eventually pivoting back to that oak trapdoor that I did earlier, adding a few more windows here. We now have basic essentials like a door and windows and more windows and even more windows. And yeah, that's basically all I've just done. I've added a door and windows, so there's a lot more detailing to do, mostly with texturing work at this point, and then adding just small details in to kind of give this a little bit more shape than it has at the moment. So let's get to that. While a lot of builders like to use texturing and various light gradients just to spruce up their builds a little bit, I think something that gets overlooked a lot comparatively is shading, using, for example here, stripped birch to give the impression that a part of the wall is cast in shadow. This is a way of kind of getting that effect of shaders without shaders in vanilla Minecraft itself, and I think it's a very powerful tool that's as powerful, if not more powerful, than just plain texturing or gradients in your builds. Trying to work this in, it can give that effect of realism and also just some more realistic texturing as opposed to just sprinkling a bunch of blocks with similar colors into a wall and calling it texturing and detail. But anyway, now moving on to detailing the framing a bit more, I'm adding some barrels to the bottoms of these pillars just to make them look a little bit more sturdy. Same idea here with the trap doors at intersection points, just to give this all a bit more of a sturdy appearance, then ultimately adding some blank spruce signs to just look like some more wood supports along the bases, going for that fantasy look. Anyway, that's already starting to look a lot better. The walls are detailed, and now, we can pivot our attention to the very undetailed roof at the moment that we are going to ignore in favor of doing the front porch. Yeah, I'm procrastinating. Sue me. Building this front porch slash walkway slash whatever you want to call it, using these mud walls to get this brown wooden looking wall that's a little bit thinner and gives you a little bit more of a vantage point into the interior, some simple fencing, and then extending our foundation. All of this just gives this build a little bit more of an interesting shape and a new visual focal point. I'm also realizing that this porch makes very little sense because there's no door to actually get to it. You just kind of walk up here at the moment, and there's just nowhere to go. And if you're wondering why someone who usually loves doing roofs was dreading this particular one so much, it's because, as you can see, a lot of this is stairs and even here is slabs, which normally is not an issue, except when you're trying to use Axiom to replace all of the blocks with a noise gradient just to make it a little bit faster, you can't do that because it'll mess up all of the slab levels. So it'll make like the upper slabs into lower slabs and vice versa. I don't know which one it actually is. It's only one of the two, but basically it would take this entire slope here and flatten it out, which means, as you can see, I was able to do the texturing for the standard blocks with Axiom, but I'm not able to do that with the stairs and slabs, which means I need to do this very large, very intricate roof, at least partially by hand, which, is very fun because I recently built this big castle that I completely failed to record, for the record. I just completely started it as an outline, was like, yep, I'm going to record this later, and then never recorded it, and it's done. Anyway, that was largely textured by hand, which means I am now thoroughly done with having to texture things, and here I am again, texturing. I'm having a lot of fun right now. And to be fair, texturing is kind of important, and it's best when you do it by hand, but also you do kind of have to put thought into it. But in this case, the two colors are really close together, and I'm just kind of going for like a very worn, weathered roof look that's really common in fantasy, and that doesn't take a ton of thought, if I'm being honest. I'm just kind of throwing prismarine in here, and it's kind of making it look like a bunch of shingles being put together and just giving this roof a little bit of that aged look. And honestly, I'm really liking how this is turning out so far. I'm kind of excited to keep going with this. But with that out of the way, Honestly, I think this is a good spot for this roof to be. It doesn't quite look really weathered, but it does look like it has a little bit of variety. The darker prismarine is a little bit more like a greener variant of the warped color. And honestly, I think that looks good. It makes it look like the shingles are a little bit mossy, and it's just giving it that fantasy charm, for lack of a better word. And don't worry, I will be addressing this overhang. I know it kind of looks really odd right now because it's kind of hanging off into nowhere. We'll be doing this in a second here. Using a similar trick as to how I did the front porch, using once again these mud walls just to give a little bit of a thinner support that doesn't entirely clash with the color scheme. With that out of the way, I can actually show the build from this angle now, which makes me happy because I've been very much avoiding it because I knew this looked weird. This is honestly probably going to turn into either like a little bit of an animal pen or like a wood storage area or something else that, would be covered. Honestly, I just added this little overhang here to give this otherwise really flat side of the building kind of an interesting thing to look at. It's really all about drawing attention to parts of your builds and the little details. It's why the chimneys are here. They're adding little pops of colors. It's why the doors are in red, just to make them stand out against what's otherwise a very creamy and very brown heavy build. But with this out of the way, honestly, at this point, we're just going to be working on small details, making it feel a little bit more worn, more pieced together than it has so far, and just adding some finishing touches to the exterior. We are not doing the interior in this video. That will be a separate video. I am doing it, mainly because I really want to. But yeah, we're going to be finishing up the exterior here in a bit, adding some details, some plants, just making this feel a little bit more part of the world and not like I'm building it in super flat, which I am. But the idea of all of my builds is that you can take them and work them into an environment later and have it fit. From this point onwards, it's all just finishing touches. You can see me adding a little bit of some logs just to make this roof look a little more supported, add a little bit of visual interest and shape contrast up there. You can see me once again just adjusting some small details, adding some greenery just to kind of blend this with the environment around it if you were to take this and put it into, say, a plains or into some village, and once again adding a little bit more greenery here on the back. One trick with greenery is always to leave more air in between the leaves than you think there should be. It'll help create that kind of illusion of fluffiness. Here, adding some lanterns hanging down from the various roofs and corners just to give it a little bit of lighting and a little bit of a detail here. I ultimately decided to turn this overhang into basically what's going to be a bit of like a hay storage facility. Just some packed mud, some brown mushroom, some what's called rooted dirt, and some hay bales tied down with rails. And I will go and use that same block palette here to create a front walkway for this tavern. And you can see two warped hanging signs there in the front just to give you a spot to potentially name this tavern. And then rooted dirt, coarse dirt, brown mushroom just to create a walkway around here. And then some ferns, some grass, some flowers here just to add a little bit of detail and visual interest and occasional pops of white. Well, there's not much left to say. It's kinda done. At least the exterior of it is. The next video on this channel should be in about 2 weeks, will be the interior of this build, and I'm really looking forward to doing that and kind of creating this atmosphere on the inside as well. But overall, I've really enjoyed this, and honestly, this is a process that you can apply for just about any fantasy builds in terms of the framing, the foundation, the roof. You can create a lot with this basic framework and just changing up colors and details. It's really about what you put in and around your buildings that's going to make them stand out and come to life. But anyway, with that all done, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. VXS out.